Actually, before we get started, you probably want to know who's here today. So going down the end, we have Michelle Perkins, right? Michelle, attorney from Phoenix, representing Dina. We have Nina Romano, right here. Dina Shacknai. I'm Keith Greer. Darren Wessel, and then Maria Tinder, a paralegal with my office. Mr. Wessel represents Nina Romano. So you can put all the faces together. Also, before we get started, some of you have already gotten the fobs and the copies of the complaints. We're also issuing a press release, a formal written press release, which has quotes from some of the parties, from the two attorneys that are here today, Mr. Wessel and myself. Those quotes are being incorporated into this press conference as if they were given verbatim. That's what we're going to be issuing to the public. So you can feel free to use those, even if our words at the mic aren't exactly what's in the quotes. We're issuing those as part of the press conference. Anyway, let's start out by thanking everybody for coming here today. As you all know, back in 2011, we lost 2 lives. We lost Rebecca Zahaus, and we lost the life of 6-year-old Maxfield Shacknai, Dina's son. After a relatively short investigation by the police, we believe it was relatively short, and again, I represent the Zahaus family, the plaintiffs in this action. The Sheriff's Department and the medical examiner's office found this to be a suicide, that Rebecca, although she was found naked, bound, gagged, hanged off the deck of the Spreckles mansion, that it was a suicide. Well, the family refused to accept this finding and hired other counsel to attempt to persuade the authorities to reopen the investigation. They were unsuccessful in doing so. In making that presentation, they presented a number of lines of evidence, lines of inquiry that they felt should have been pursued by the police. Evidently the Sheriff's Department disagreed, and the suicide finding remained their opinion. Thereafter, the family hired my firm, Greer & Associates, and also Fred Gaston of Gaston & Gaston, who can't be with us today, in order to pursue a legal action and expose who killed their sister and daughter. I represent Pari, the mother, and then Rebecca's estate, and also Rebecca's deceased father, who also happened to die just before this lawsuit was filed. Based on the evidence that we had from the Sheriff's Department primarily, we filed a suit initially, and we thought we had evidence to support the claims alleging that both Dina and Nina were involved in the death of Rebecca. Although Adam Shacknai, who to this day remains a defendant, he's the sole defendant in the case now, we did allege that the violence, that Rebecca's actual murder was perpetrated by Adam. We've always alleged that. We have evidence we felt put Dina and Nina at the scene of the incident. After years of discovery and investigation and examination by experts, however, we found that evidence has been refuted. That our theory that they were involved in the case, our initial theory, was just flat out wrong. Through multiple sources, we have confirmed that Dina Shacknai, to my right, was at Rady's Children's Hospital in the pediatric intensive care unit with her son, Max, that evening, who had suffered, not known at that time, but they were fatal injuries from a fall at the house the day before. This evidence is overwhelming. It's in fact surveillance video from Rady's children's security system that shows throughout the day and evening of Rebecca's murder that Dina was at the hospital there. You've been provided with fobs that have that evidence on it. You can see that her whereabouts. She was in and out of the front door every hour and a half or so. And in particular, at the time when the scream was heard by the neighbor, there was a neighbor in Coronado, a neighbor of the Spreckles mansion, that stated that she heard a woman screaming about 11:30 that evening, which we believe was Rebecca screaming at that time. That at that time, within minutes, Dina is seen on the cameras at the hospital. The evidence has also shown that Nina Romano is not involved in any way in Rebecca's death, and thus, based on this evidence, we are dismissing from the case both Nina Romano and Dina Shacknai, who are here with us today. I want to take this opportunity to express a real heartfelt apology to Dina and Nina and to their families, probably to even their friends, the trauma that this has caused to them. As you know, this has been a very high-profile case, and it's affected their lives in ways that we can't even know, and unfortunately the process isn't perfect, and I just want to do my best to rectify that so that the world knows that they were not involved in any way. This was particularly hard on them, as you know, because of the loss of Max. It was a son, a nephew, and your mom, who has cancer now, is dealing with this at the same time. Dealing with their daughters having to go through this. It's been very, very traumatic, and I just want to make sure that they know that I do feel badly for that, and hope we can work through this and get on with the task at hand, which I've been asked to do, which is to find who murdered Rebecca Zahaus. We have given you a copy of the amended complaint, just naming Adam. That is under submission right now with the court. We expect a ruling shortly. Regardless of what the court does, we have entered formal dismissals against Dina and Nina. They are out of the case, done, period. I would also like to correct, there's been rumors out there and some media statements that there were millions of dollars offered in this case. That's never happened, never happened. Every single one of the defendants has adamantly stated their position that they are not guilty of anything, any wrongdoing at all in this case, and there haven't been millions of dollars thrown at us. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Trial is set for the end of February 2018, and I think it is almost guaranteed that this matter will be going to trial at that time. We have, I think, Darren, did you want to make a comment? Yeah. This is Mr. Wessel, represents Nina Romano.
I'm Darren Wessel.
Spelling of your name, please.
Darren, D-A-R-I-N, Wessel, W-E-S-S-E-L, and I'll provide cards. I represent Nina Romano. One of the realities of our legal system is that attorneys don't know the facts. They have to go on what's available, and it's through the discovery process that we learn facts and evidence. I understand why Mr. Greer filed the lawsuit the way he did. My clients knew that the allegations were untrue and that they would be exonerated, as plaintiffs have acknowledged now. There is undisputed evidence through the discovery process that shows that Dina Shacknai and Nina Romano could not have had anything to do with Rebecca's death. We understand that the plaintiffs believe this was murder. My client and her sister don't know because they weren't there. And they're based on my having gone through and deposed the Sheriff's Department personnel and crime scene personnel and looking at the physical evidence, there may be some answers that we never know. And I can certainly understand how the Sheriff's Department reached the decision and conclusion that it did. And there is certainly physical evidence to support that. I understand that the plaintiffs and their experts see the evidence differently, and that is why we have a legal process to work those facts out and through a jury make some determinations. I will note that part of the unfortunate process of the legal system is that insurance carriers that defend our clients sometimes need to make decisions that protect their clients and their insureds despite their wishes. The insurance carrier for Nina Romano bargained for a release to protect her in any eventuality because we don't know what Adam Shacknai and his counsel will do. We think that they are taking the position that this was a suicide and that Adam had nothing to do with Rebecca's death, but that will ultimately be up to a jury to decide.
Anybody else? Ms. Perkins? Is that a question? Oh, they asked me to clarify by dismissing them from the case, they were dismissed what's called with prejudice, meaning that done forever, there's no way to change that. You can dismiss a case without prejudice, which means that they can be brought back in at a later date. We dismissed it with finality, so they can hopefully go on down the road and get on with their lives. Somebody else want to say anything? Anybody?
I do.
Good. Should you hold the mic? Yeah. Good.
I had a prepared statement today, and elected to speak from the heart, to share with you some of my thoughts about what Keith Greer has said. And I want to thank him for his unprecedented apology to us, because we have been innocent victims in all this, just as Maxie and Rebecca were victims. Although Keith Greer and I don't share his view about the litigation and the way that it's going, I do believe that Rebecca and Max deserve answers. I've reviewed some of the data, and I do believe absolutely that I understand why, and I absolutely believe that this deserves some serious questions and time and effort for both parties. I would also like to say that years ago, when we lost Max, we were told that Maxie had a heart attack, and that he tumbled over the banister. This was directly from his father, and it was confirmed by his medical records at Rady Children's Hospital. I was told that Rebecca gave him CPR, and Nina and I were so grateful, because we knew that because he had received this CPR immediately, he had a much greater chance of survival. The EMT had arrived within 2 minutes, and this is all documented in medical records as well as the EMT reports. So what we understood was that Max had no spinal cord injuries. He had gotten oxygen within 4 minutes, and they were looking to rule out something called long QT syndrome, which is a genetic disorder. Nina and I were asked to provide our DNA, our genetics. That's where they were going. This was supported by Dina Shacknai in his interview with law enforcement. So never in all that time did I ever think that Max was not going to walk out of that hospital. He wasn't going to walk or talk or go to first grade or have girlfriends or play soccer. And quite frankly, I was grateful to Rebecca. Nina and I were grateful because we believed that she is the one who took the immediate action to save his life. When I learned on Wednesday morning that Jonah shared with me what had happened, I was shocked. I was shocked because I didn't understand why. What purpose could there be? Because why? Max was going to be okay. We hadn't gotten any CT results yet. We didn't get them until Wednesday late afternoon. So this was a mystery to me, and inexplicable. When we received the news that Max had sustained some significant damage on Wednesday evening, I immediately tried to reach out to doctors in Phoenix to look at rehab programs. So even at that time, I still never believed that Max wouldn't walk out of that hospital. And if anything, Rebecca, with what we were told, had provided him CPR. And I don't think people have understood that, realized that, and that's never even been communicated. However, it's so well documented, I think it needs to be addressed. I'll reiterate, I don't necessarily agree with the course this litigation is taking. However, I believe that we will do everything to help as we can to make sure that there is answers for Rebecca and for Max. I think, Nina, that's what, is that, okay.
I think, is that it for formal? Nina? Okay, Nina. Give him a mic.
thank you for listening to us, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate it. We have been, one last comment, this last 4 years has been torturous for us. We have lost so much, not just Max, but I before this was practicing as a child psychologist, so children were always my passion, not just my 6-year-old son, who was amazing, but also children in general. So this has had an impact on our career and our reputations, and it's been a really horrible thing. And I know and that's why I respect the fact that Keith Greer has made the unprecedented step of making the apology, because you don't find that very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone doing it, so it was the right thing to do it, and we appreciate that. I think so.
Hi, thank you to Mr. Greer for issuing the apology. It does mean a lot, and I know that it was the right thing to do, and I appreciate that. I just want to say, I pray now that the Zahaus family and our family, that we can begin the process of attempting to heal our hearts from this loss. It has been tragic, life-shattering, and I hope that their family and our family can start to find some level of peace while we begin the process of rebuilding our lives. We're starting kind of from scratch. Our lives were forever changed 6 years ago, as I know theirs were, and it's going to take a lot of time, but I hope that now that this is going to be behind us, and thank you again, Mr. Greer, we can actually start moving forward. Thank you all for coming.
I think that's it for our formal comments. I want to encourage the media, if you could. Whenever something shocking and bad happens, it gets a lot of coverage. And this kind of story doesn't get as much. And this today is really, it's not for me, it's for them. Because they've had in the news all this years of being, in the news of being involved in a murder. And now whatever we can do to get out to the world and say, you know what, they weren't. And we're confident they weren't. Whatever can be done to do that, we just really appreciate it. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
When did you receive the surveillance video that you handed out today?
We finally received that in late September, I believe, September 30th of last year.
But it did take some time to get it, to view it, because it was a sizable
Yeah.
amount of, I think it was 27
Yeah.
CDs of
Yeah.
video footage.
It was the process. We didn't have anything from the beginning. There was a bizarre story, right? What was it, that the DOJ had come in and taken it from Rady's hospital, and they had it at the FBI-related lab for a while, and then Rady's had destroyed their copies, and then the discs that eventually wound up with the Sheriff's Department. We sent in subpoenas, all the parties did, and what we got back was nothing. Some still shots of Dina Shacknai, so we knew they'd looked at the films. But then we finally went to a hands-on viewing of the evidence at the evidence locker for the San Diego Sheriffs, and there in a plastic bag were these discs with that little statement on it that says, unable to copy, incompatible with our computers or something. And so then, and this was just in the latter part of last year, and we jumped on at that point in time, made inroads, and eventually got to get the footage, figure out how to use it, go through it, and when you're going to see, when you look at the footage and the fobs, it's, bright as day. It's Dina in and out of the hospital all day long, all night long, and so at that point in time, we started the process of negotiating to figure out how to release them and how the new facts fit in, and it was a process. Yeah, and we wound up doing the right thing, and the right thing was being here today and then letting everybody know that they didn't do it. They didn't do it. Yeah.
The evidence exonerating Nina.
Nina has two things happened. One, Nina, when she was staying overnight at the house down the block, there were witnesses there that had her coming back to the house and acknowledging that she was there that evening. We had her cell phone. She was on the phone with her husband and other folks during the time she walked over. But really, the whole thing kind of fell apart when we had an eyewitness who to this day says that he saw Dina there. A very convincing gentleman. And I think he's honest and he believes what he's saying. And that's really what we based putting Nina there. When we have an eyewitness, how can you get around that, right? How you get around that is with photographic, time-stamped security, videos, which show it couldn't be her. And so then when you take Dina back and put her at her son's side, where she said she was all along, now all of a sudden everything falls in place, because Nina admitted that she'd walked over, nobody was home, or she couldn't get in the house, and she went back to where she was staying. At the same time that the tourist is there seeing a woman at the house. So all of a sudden it fits, all the pieces fit in place, and then boom, it goes. I had a pit in my stomach from the time I filed this thing. You get that solar plex thing, something's not quite right. I knew we were doing the right thing, because I'm personally convinced this is murder. I'm personally convinced that that's just the way I feel, and I'll never be dissuaded from that. And getting the murder is a good thing. And so, but there was still that feeling. It didn't feel right. Something was wrong. When these two are released, they're where they were is confirmed with evidence. They're taken out of the picture. It all falls into place just really clean. And I tell you, my heart rate dropped 10 beats a minute when we finally got that evidence and made that decision. So hope that answered your question.
Let me-
Yeah.
You
Yeah, go ahead.
you have a witness that has Nina returning to the home, and you have cell phone tracking on Nina's phone that says she left the house at a certain time?
Correct. We also have the sheriff's department, the morning following, or actually it's the evening following the death of Rebecca Zahaus. They photographed my client. They took all of her clothing. They sampled her DNA. They took her fingerprints. They compared those fingerprints with all of the fingerprints found in the upstairs bedroom. There were absolutely no matches to my client. They sampled the DNA that they collected from the room, and she was excluded, which, since my client's DNA was taken and she's sisters with Dina, also would exclude Dina from any of the DNA evidence found in the upstairs bedroom, the bedroom where Rebecca was found hanging off the balcony. So all of that evidence shows that there was absolutely no connection with the key instrumentalities related to Rebecca's death.
But the cell phone tracking and the witness and the lack of DNA and fingerprints at the scene have been available for 4 years, 3 years?
The report describing that evidence was available, but we had to depose the sheriff's department personnel to find out what exactly they did, what they didn't do. We would interview and depose one person who said that, well, this is the person that actually collected those samples. So it was a process to find out and make sure that the actual physical evidence that was collected backed up what we had as attorneys and information, and all of the evidence has shown that to be true. So, and also when we get information, we don't always know. We get I think 500 pages of cell phone data that, to anyone, when you look at it, to a cell phone person that's an engineer, it makes complete sense. To attorneys and everyone else, you would look at it and you say, what am I looking at? So we had to have experts tell us what that information said and confirm the geolocation.
And I understand there was a $100,000 payment made by Allstate on behalf of Nina to the plaintiff's attorney. What was the date of that payment?
The release was obtained in February of this year. That was all the insurance carrier's decision against my client's wishes to protect her and also to help end their bleeding. Sure.
I just want to say, I was adamantly opposed to that.
You might-
Sorry. I just want to make it clear, I was adamantly opposed to that. I feel that it was a form of extortion. I feel that it was completely wrong that if you're released from the case, to accept money after that. I find that, I apologize, but I find that to be completely wrong. So I was very.
Part of the negotiations in releasing them from the case?
I had no say-so in it.
me
I
say-
had no say, I was, even though Allstate is my carrier, I had no say-so in the decision whatsoever.
Yeah.
They went against what I asked them to do.
Here's something, and that's, what she says is absolutely true throughout. Her attorney shared that with me throughout the process, that the client does not want to do this, not want to do this. I personally, I feel good about it, and I think it was actually good for you in a way that maybe I'll make it clear now, clearer. There's another part of that agreement. I can talk about the agreement, right? There's another part of that agreement, and that is, we feel so confident that she is not involved, that as part of that agreement, we agreed to indemnify Nina if she is brought back in the case by another party. Although we've dismissed the two of them with prejudice, Adam Shacknai can still bring them back into the case under a claim of equitable indemnification. With that hanging out there, that means that although Nina is released, there's still that hanging in the background that she could get brought in at any time. And if she gets brought in at any time, is there going to be insurance coverage for that? Are you going to have to pay it yourself? Are you this going to start over again? And so we agreed to indemnify her so that if she is brought back in, we waive any liability that's found against her. So that means if he does that, if Adam brings her back in, she doesn't have to worry about hiring a lawyer. She doesn't have to worry about any liability anyway. She's literally, as a result of that deal, walking down the road. I'm talking about our deal right now too. Because we have that deal with you too. We don't. But with hers, there's no money involved with Nina. Dina, zero money involved with Dina.
What's the total amount as part of?
That's it. There's $100,000 on her, which, as you know, in this case, I just spent $50,000 on experts in the last 2 months. That is a draw. There's been I would guesstimate $4 to $6 million in attorney's fees have been spent on this case. So when you have an insurance carrier looking at that and lingering through this process, going through a summary judgment motion process to get out.
I suspect it doesn't even cover your costs.
No way. That although it looks like a lot, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's everything that she had on her policy. And smart for the insurance company, they're done. Smart for Nina, she's out and she can't get hurt in any way now. She's clear of this whole thing. So that's what, because I know he asked me to give the money back. Actually, somebody asked me to give the money back. I said no, I'm not, because you know what? It was because I'm the guy who does the right thing, right? That's I do. I like to do the right thing. And so well, if she's innocent, why don't you give the money back? And that's exactly it, because we do indemnify her, and we're protecting her at this point in time. If she gets brought back in the case, we've got her covered. And I feel good about that.
Do you have a couple bullet points on why you think Adam Shacknai killed her?
Well, we just had I have to be real careful. This is very aggressive. This is very.
This is, may I make a
Yeah.
comment at this point, just?
No,
No, I won't.
not yet. What's it about?
Do
Here's,
we have to confer?
no. The question from the floor, though, is what are the couple of bullet points? And it's in the complaint. I can tell you. We've just had our two experts deposed, our handwriting expert and our knot tying expert. Our handwriting expert has opined on the record at deposition that the handwriting is more likely Adam's as opposed to Rebecca's, and that the knots and way that she was tied exhibit nautical, maritime type skills, which we believe, since he's a tugboat captain, that would be consistent, and Rebecca, we don't have any experience. Now, one thing I know she wants me to say at this point, I'm going to say it for you. She does not believe that Adam did this. She wanted me to make clear that's not her position. Go ahead.
I want to make something really clear. I think this investigation was done quickly, and I also think that there was numerous agencies involved. To sue your question earlier, why did this all take so long to be produced? Because quite frankly, it was used by the San Diego Sheriff's Department in the first place to exonerate us. So it's a good question. But I think when you have a department, I didn't know how many agencies were involved at the time, but we have the Department of Justice. They had 8 agents there at the scene, apparently, according to the records. San Diego Sheriff's Department, Coronado Police Department, and then we have the FBI who has the video. So I guess communication, between 4 agencies can be convoluted at best. I don't know that they looked at other possibilities. I think, this is where Keith Greer and I disagree. I believe they haven't really, looked any further than what they just saw in front of them. And that's the part I think warrants us another look. But that's where we differ.
Dina has not yet been deposed in the case. That's going to be coming up here probably in the next month or so. And I have a feeling there's going to be some exciting things that are going to be shared at that deposition. Yes.
Dina Shacknai been deposed for anybody?
Yes,
By who?
by all of us, yeah.
Did he ever say in any of his depositions what he thinks she saved him, can you save her, means? What does it mean to him?
No, he didn't. He didn't.
At best, we know that Jonah made a 12:50 a.m. phone call to Rebecca's cell phone that went to voicemail. There is an indication that shortly after that, the voicemail message was retrieved and deleted, presumptively by Rebecca, although I think the plaintiffs will disagree with that. The technology at the time meant that when that message was deleted, it was gone. The sheriff's department was unable to retrieve that message. At best, we have in the interviews with Dina Shacknai an indication where he didn't really say what he said in that message, but he speculated that the only way that he thought that Rebecca would have killed herself is if maybe in that message he said something that she took to believe that their relationship was over. But it was speculative, so we don't really know. And that's one of those unanswered questions that we will never know what exactly was on that voicemail message.
He didn't remember if he told her in the voicemail if the relationship was over?
He didn't say that. He didn't. I think he's paraphrasing. That's his interpretation. That wasn't, that wasn't what he said exactly. So he was very vague. He was very vague. But that deposition, I mean, if there was a request made for the excerpts of that deposition, that could probably be arranged.
Mr. Wessel and Mr. Greer, you have different interpretations of the evidence about who was culpable for Rebecca Zahaus' death. Mr. Wessel, why do you support the finding of the Sheriff's Department that this was a suicide?
I think that there is physical evidence, mainly the only Rebecca's bare footprints on the balcony and a matched boot print of the first responding Coronado Police Department officer on that balcony that is indicative of her hopping out onto the balcony. The ropes were very loose. And I understand the plaintiff's position that what's called petechiae, hemorrhaging of the eyes and mouth and lips, is generally indicative of a slower manual strangulation rather than what you would consider a traditional, what's called a dead drop hanging, where someone's dropped and hung from a gallows. The evidence showed that the bed where the rope was tied moved, and there's an indication that despite the nature of the hanging, because it wasn't a specific dead drop, that it would have been a slow strangulation. The plaintiffs and their experts will disagree, and that's one of the things that a jury will have to determine is was that evidence consistent with a manual strangulation or a hanging? And the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy believed that and said that the fact of the petechiae hemorrhaging was inconclusive either way, and that ultimately you would still see and can still expect to see that type of injury with a hanging of this nature. So that's, again, one of those areas of medical science and evidence that's in dispute and will ultimately have to be decided by a jury.
Since we have you, sir, when was Jonah aware, when he left that voicemail message that night, was he already aware that Max was brain dead?
Well, the indication is that the doctors were going to be running additional tests to be able to tell. There was an uncertainty as to the nature of the brain swelling that Max was suffering from. Now, we don't know whether Jonah, with his medical knowledge and his knowledge of the medical field, may have read into what the doctors were saying and what the machines were saying differently. I know that he communicated to my client, and I believe Dina was in the room, that Max was fighting the breathing machine, and that was a sign that he was improving. And so my client and Dina certainly had the belief, and Jonah confirmed the belief, that Max was improving, and that was on the evening of the 12th of July.
That was on the evening of her death? Rebecca's death?
Correct.
And just finally, I assume is there similar videotape from Rady showing Jonah in and out and there that entire night?
There is some footage. We know that there were a couple of doors at the hospital that were not covered fully by camera coverage that was used by Jonah to exit the hospital to avoid any media coverage. The Ronald McDonald House had coverage which showed him present, but there are some time gaps that at this point we have not narrowed down.
I just wanted to make the last comment, that again, I think sometimes, you know, the San Diego Sheriff's Department, they did this very quickly, and perhaps they needed to do a bit more of an in-depth investigation regarding, you know, other possibilities, instead of limiting it to people that, you know, they really didn't have they limited the scope, and I think that was a very premature way to handle this case. So, you know, again, anybody out there who thinks that this could never happen to them, it happened to us. And why? Because an investigation wasn't so thorough as to really provide the evidence that was necessary to actually, you know, point toward the perpetrators who did these things. And so I think it falls back on law enforcement, really, to do what they need to do, what we all pay for them to do with our taxes, and investigate.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? A couple years ago, you had a news conference in Coronado and covered that, and you
Yes.
suggested to the media at the time that maybe not enough scrutiny was given to possible involvement by Rebecca in maybe an accidental situation, a scenario where she was partly responsible, maybe not by intent, but partly responsible for Max's death. Do you still believe that there is any grounds for that belief?
So when I had that news conference, unfortunately, a month after, or 6 weeks, the day before the debriefing, September the 1st, 2011, I did get an EMT report that said that no CPR was given, and I was devastated. So, but looking back, quite frankly, I believe that Rebecca deeply cared about Max, and I don't believe she was there, but I quite frankly don't believe that she would have hurt him. I don't know what else happened that day or who else was there other than her sister, who was a teenager. So to the extent, I mean, I wasn't there. And one of the things that I wish today, I wish that Max were back here, but I certainly wish that Rebecca were back here so we could ask her those questions.
So again, you don't believe she was involved in any form or fashion in accidentally perhaps causing his death?
I don't, you know what, I don't believe, again, when I was initially told that this was a heart attack, that I absolutely 100% believe Jonah, because there would be no reason for him to, well, at the time, I had no reason to think he would not absolutely tell me about what happened to our son. So a year later, when I learned that Max's death, according to the experts' reports, were the result of a homicide, I was shocked, and I didn't know what to think. I mean, what would anybody think? So I never, in all of my statements, have ever apportioned blame to her. But I considered every possibility, and I still have no answers. But again, I don't believe that Rebecca hurt Maxie. Does that answer your question?
Right, well, thank you, everybody.